Welcome to Betrayal Stories. In today's video, we're diving into a story that reminds us how quiet moments can carry the loudest consequences. They say temptation never shouts, it whispers. And sometimes that whisper finds you in the most ordinary places, and like your own kitchen, under the warm light of a lazy afternoon. My name is Elenina, and this is the story of how a simple spoon of custard almost destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and myself. The day it began was nothing special. The house felt like it always did. Quiet, predictable, too clean to feel alive. My husband, Greg, had left early that morning for another business trip. He always said he'd only be gone a few days, but somehow those few days turned into a week, then 2. I used to count the days until he came home. Somewhere along the years, I stopped. After 20 years of marriage, the excitement had faded into routines, and routines had turned into silence. Our conversations had become practical, emotionless, like 2 co-workers discussing schedules instead of a couple sharing a life. That afternoon, I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of golden custard I'd been perfecting for days. The sunlight spilled through the window, glinting off the spoon in my hand. Cooking had become my therapy, the one place where I still felt some sense of control. I hummed softly to the music playing on the radio, an old tune I didn't even like, but it filled the silence. And then I heard the door creak open. It was David, Greg's son from his first marriage, my stepson. He'd come home from college for a short visit while Greg was away. I hadn't seen him in months. The last time I did, he was still that lanky boy who would sneak cookies before dinner. But now, standing in the doorway with his hands tucked in his pockets, he wasn't a boy anymore. He had grown into himself, taller, confident, with that easy smile that could melt through anyone's defenses. His hair was still messy, but in a way that looked deliberate now. He leaned casually against the counter, looking around the kitchen like it was both familiar and new. "Smells good in here," he said, his voice warm and teasing. "Custard," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I've been trying to get the texture right this time," he grinned. "You always get it right." It was such a simple comment, but something about the way he said it made my pulse skip. His eyes met mine, just long enough to make me forget what I was doing. I laughed a little, nervous at how easily that warmth reached me. "Here," I said quickly, handing him a spoon. "Taste it. Tell me if it's too sweet." He hesitated, smiling in that boyish, half-serious way. "Only if you promise not to be mad if I say it's perfect." I rolled my eyes and lifted the spoon toward him. When he reached for it, his fingers brushed against mine. Barely a second of contact, so small I might have imagined it. But it was enough to send a spark down my arm. He tasted it slowly, his eyes still on me. "It's just right," he said softly. I turned away too quickly, pretending to wash the spoon, though my hands trembled. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy. It felt like something had shifted, quietly, without permission. That night, as I lay in bed beside Greg's empty pillow, the house felt colder than usual. I kept replaying that moment in the kitchen, the look in David's eyes, the warmth of that accidental touch. It wasn't wrong, not really, but it felt dangerously close to something I didn't want to name. Over the next few days, David seemed to find more reasons to linger around the kitchen. He'd offer to help chop fruit, ask about old family recipes, or stay back after dinner just to talk. His laughter filled the quiet corners of the house that had felt empty for so long. He'd ask about my day, and actually listen. Greg used to do that once, but it had been years since anyone looked at me and made me feel like my words mattered. I told myself it was harmless, just conversation, just kindness. But each time, our eyes met. It felt like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, pretending we weren't aware of how close our feet were to the drop. One evening, the sky was heavy with rain. The house smelled of vanilla and cinnamon. I was experimenting with another dessert recipe when David walked in holding 2 glasses of wine. "Just a small toast," he said with a grin. "For the best cook I know." I smiled, pretending to scold him. "You're just saying that because I feed you." He chuckled, leaning against the counter. "Maybe, but you do more than that, Ella. You make this place feel like home." The words landed deeper than I expected. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It had been years since anyone said something like that to me. Simple, sincere. I felt my throat tighten, and I laughed it off too quickly. We talked for hours that night, about college, about his friends, about how confusing adulthood could be. I told him about my dreams before I got married, about how I used to paint but stopped because life got too busy. He listened like every word mattered. When I stood to put the dishes away, our hands brushed again. This time, neither of us moved right away. The world seemed to shrink down to that one quiet space between us. I stepped back, forcing a small laugh. "It's late," I whispered. "You should get some rest." He nodded. "Good night, Ella." That night, sleep didn't come. I stared. At the ceiling, my mind caught between guilt and something I couldn't quite name. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I knew my thoughts had started wandering where they shouldn't. In the mornings, I'd hear his footsteps in the hallway and feel my heart skip. I'd tell myself to stop, to breathe, to remember who I was. But loneliness is a powerful thing. It finds cracks in your resolve and grows there quietly. One afternoon, I was making custard again, humming softly. David came home earlier than usual and stood behind me for a while before saying gently, "You always hum when you're happy." I turned around, startled. "You remember that?" He nodded, smiling faintly. "You used to hum when I was a kid. I remember thinking it made the house feel safe." The word hit me like a wave. Safe. That was all I'd ever wanted to feel again. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. He stepped a little closer. Not too close, just enough for me to feel his warmth behind me. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured softly. "I just wanted you to know that you matter." My walls cracked. After years of feeling invisible, those words broke something open inside me. I didn't move closer, but I didn't step away either. We stood there, suspended in that impossible space between what is and what shouldn't be. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even a promise. It was 2 lonely people finding a little warmth in the cold. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I thought about Greg. How far apart we'd grown. How I had allowed silence to replace affection. I thought about David and the way he looked at me like I still existed. I hadn't crossed a line, but my heart had. And sometimes that's worse. Because emotional betrayal doesn't leave evidence. No lipstick stains, no messages, no proof, just a quiet ache that whispers, "You've changed." The next morning, David packed his bags to return to college. He hugged me goodbye longer than he should have, softer than he needed to. "Take care of yourself, okay?" he said quietly. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. When the door closed, the house fell into silence again. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the space he had left behind. And that's when I realized the most dangerous affairs aren't the ones that happen in secret. They're the ones that begin in silence.